Hey guys, how's it going? Chet here, and welcome to the first episode of a new series of videos which is designed to look at how I go about improving my improvisation skills. By watching these videos, you'll learn the techniques and methods that I use to develop my own skills so that you can then take them away and apply them to your own playing. Now, improvising is something that I've really neglected in the past, and as a result, it's at a much lower level than my technical ability on the guitar. I've got to a stage where improvising with the standard minor pentatonics in a rock and blues setting has become really comfortable, but I've never really tried to push it further than that, and I keep using the same old licks over and over again. I guess I kind of got to a stage where I've just assumed that the really sophisticated players are just born with it. Now, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, and I'm on a mission to fix that and prove myself wrong. Now, one of the key factors in developing your skills as an improviser is improving your vocabulary. So I'll be doing this by transcribing my favourite licks by ear directly from the legendary musicians that played them. And then after that, we'll be analysing these licks so that we can take them and apply them to different musical contexts. Once you've learnt this process, you'll then be able to use it to steal the licks that you love and make them your own. Just so you know, in future videos, I'll be showing you guys exactly how to practice these guitar licks. I've often found that online tutorials like those top 10 guitar licks to know otherwise you'll never get good at guitar type things will end once they've taught you the notes and explained the theory. It's then assumed that the viewer just knows how to go away and work on it, which is actually easier said than done. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that lesson, and many more that will actually help you improve your improvisation skills in general. Right, so this first video is going to look at a lick played by the amazing guitarist Matt Schofield, and it features on one of his songs called Anything But Time. Let's have a look at how this sounds. Here we go. I mean, come on, that sounds awesome. It's a little bit more sophisticated than the average minor blues pentatonic lick, and it's exactly the type of thing that I want to be able to bring into my own playing, even if I don't know why yet. It just sounds cool. And I guess that's kind of the first step. Start by learning vocabulary that you think sounds cool, instead of what other people deem to be an essential lick. Because if you don't like the sound of it, why would you ever play it?
Well, duh.
Now, I think that sounds cool. The next step is to actually figure out what the hell he's playing. So, time to pick up those guitars because we've got some work to do.
Gentlemen, let's get down to business.
Now, the way I like to work out a lick is to first work out the chords that the lick is actually playing over. What you'll find is that knowing the underlying harmony of the song will somewhat guide you to the notes that the player is choosing, because at the end of the day, they're making their decisions based on what will sound good with those chords. So we're kind of working backwards here. If we know the chords, then we have a higher probability of knowing what notes the player will actually choose. It's important to note here though, that even if we know the harmony, we can't just rely on the player to play the theoretical right notes of the chord progression. In fact, it's often the theoretical wrong note which actually sounds awesome. So if you're about to transcribe a lick and you're only expecting there to be diatonic notes the whole way, you're going to find it quite difficult to work out. So you're still going to need a really strong ear to work out the pitch of each note. It's just that knowing the harmony will provide you with a little bit more information, and that's always a good thing. So let's actually start transcribing this lick, and like I said, we're going to start with the chords first. Now, this is a blues song, and quite a common blues chord progression is the 1, 4 and 5 chords from a key, each being made dominant, or some variation of that. So that's probably going to be a good place to start with. But just for the sake of argument, let's assume that we know nothing about this song and start from scratch. Now, the way I like to work out a chord progression is to identify the bass notes of each chord first, because that's going to tell me how the chords are actually moving, and as a result, give me more information about what the chords actually are. So let's have a listen to the chords first and try and work out each bass note. Now, the first bass note there is definitely ba. So here we go. Ba, ba. Now the next note away is a major second interval, and I know that because I'm relating it to Happy Birthday. Ba 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 ba. Now if you can't quite do that yet, make sure you check out my ear training videos on my channel, because it's so important to develop a strong enough ear to be able to identify intervals. It will just make the transcribing process so much quicker. Right, the next chord. So you can quite clearly hear that bottom note is ba, and it also feels like the movement is from a 5 to a 1. It sounds like a perfect cadence. We've got a build-up of tension and then a resolution which releases all that tension. So we can identify that movement as being a 5 to 1. Now what we got to do is just find out where those notes are on our guitar. So let's try and play the first one. So there's the first one there. And we're moving a major second higher, right, I said? And then we've got a cadence down to the 1. So our assumption that it's a blues song with some sort of 1-4-5 wasn't far off the mark, right? Now, the next thing we need to do is actually work out the rest of the notes in each chord. To do that is a little bit more difficult because what we're trying to find is the individual notes in a chord while all of the notes are being played at the same time. The bass note is quite easy, which is why I start with it, because more often than not, the bass player is playing the same thing, so it's really easily identifiable. But the other notes in the chord can be really hard to identify sometimes, particularly the notes in the middle of the chord, especially when the guitar is being mixed with a full band like it is here. So the next thing I do is pretty much play the chord and see if I can identify any other notes. Okay, so here we go for the first note. So in that first chord, I can hear this note being played. Ba, and that is a major ninth away from my root note or my bass note. So we've got those two notes being played together. Now let's see if we can hear any other notes. So I can hear this note being played. Ba. Now, ba, ba. That's Star Trek, so I know that's a flat 7. Now, so far we got this. And we now have to find the important note which tells us the quality of the chord, whether there's a major third or a minor third. And I'm having a real difficulty actually trying to hear that here. So what I might do in this case is actually just play the minor third over that chord and see how it sounds. So let's go for that. Now that sounds horrible, right? So we automatically know it's not a minor chord, which means it's probably going to be a dominant chord of some sort. I'll just double check the major third does sound right. And yeah, it fits perfectly well, right? So we know that first chord is an E flat 9. And that's kind of the process I take to work out chords. It's not rocket science, you literally just try and listen to each note, but the actual process of doing it can sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming. Now, the next chord, let's work on that one. Okay, so we know we're going up a major second here to F. Okay, so having played Purple Haze thousands of times over my career, I know that sound is a sharp 9 sound. Because basically, that is the sound. That's the Hendrix chord, right? So here, we're playing an F7 sharp 9. I don't even need to be able to try and work out each individual note there. I kind of just know it. And that shows you the importance of actually learning repertoire. By doing that, you're actually training your ear the whole time. Let's see if we can work out that last chord. So I can hear this note quite clearly. It's a ba, ba, ba. It's the same note, right? So it's going to be there. Now let's see if I can hear any other notes. Da, da. So I can definitely hear da. Now, ba, ba. It's a minor third, right? So I know that's it. Now it's likely at this stage that we've gone from an E flat 9 chord to an F7 sharp 9 chord, and now we've got a B flat in the bass and a minor third. So I'm gonna try a minor 7 chord because we have that top note as well. So let's try and play that with the chord progression and see if it sounds right. So yeah, that last chord is definitely right, and it's a B flat minor 7 chord. So far what we have is an E flat 9 chord, an F7 sharp 9 chord, finishing with a B flat minor 7 chord. So I'm just going to play those 3 chords with the track. And that's the process I use. All I do is I try and find the bass notes of each chord. Now, more often than not, the bass note is actually the root note. That's not necessarily always true, but it's a safe place to start. Next, I just try and see if I can identify any other notes in the chord. And finally, and probably most importantly, I try and determine the quality of the chord, whether it's a major chord, a minor chord, or a suspended chord. And there you go. If you've got any other methods that you like to use when working out chords and chord progressions, please do let me know in the comment section below, because I'm always looking for new ways to develop my own playing. Now, we've worked out the harmony. Up next is actually transcribing the lick itself. Now, the way I like to work out lead lines is to play the track bit by bit, and maybe only transcribe 2 or 3 notes at a time and fully memorize them before moving on. That way, I can actually memorize the lick while I'm working it out, instead of doing a whole chunk, getting to the end and completely forgetting what I've done before.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
So let's get started with this lick. Let's listen to the first few notes here. Now, he's clearly moving into the root note of the chord, and we know the chord is E flat 9. So that's the second note, and quite a common movement is to actually just slide into the second note from 1 semitone above. And that's exactly what he's doing. So let's work out the next few notes. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Now, having practiced my arpeggios loads in the past, I'm quite familiar with the motion of those intervals, and I think it actually is just an arpeggio. Now, we're playing an E flat 9 chord here, and this is where knowing the harmony actually really helps, because an E flat 9 chord, at the end of the day, is just a type of dominant chord, right? So we've got E flat dominant 7. So if I play an E flat dominant arpeggio over this chord, it should sound similar, because I think it's a dominant arpeggio. So we've got this. And those are the exact notes. If I actually carry on, it sounds similar to the whole lick. So let's try and work out the next few notes. So far we've got this. And then the next note.
5 minutes later.
Yeah, so he's sliding up a semitone there. So he's moving out of the arpeggio there. We've got this. And then... Ba, ba, ba. Yeah, that's that note. And he's actually just moving back into the arpeggio, so we've got this. Cool, so that's that first bit of the lick done. Let's see if we can work out the next bit. Dun, dun, dun. Those are the notes for sure, but something weird is happening there.
I could lose my money, baby, and I wouldn't care a dime.
Okay, so he's going like this. Then carrying on from there. Okay, fine. That's quite a common motion, which is how I worked that out quite quickly. Cool, I know where this is going. He's playing a diminished arpeggio, going... How far does he go? Okay, so he goes... And that's where he stops. And then he slides into the root note. So, in total, we have this. So the next step for me is to actually try and get that lick up to speed so I can play it as fluently as he does. Now, depending on the difficulty of the lick, I might take different approaches. If it's really difficult, what I'll do is I'll split the lick up and play along with a metronome with proper regimented practice every day. But with this lick, I feel that it's within my capability of playing. So all I'm going to do is play it a few times with the track, and hopefully I get it up to speed pretty quickly. You're going to see that now, and I'm going to catch you guys in a few seconds.
I could lose my money, baby, and I wouldn't care a dime. I'll just go out and earn it again. The only thing it costs me is my time. I could lose.
Cool, so I've done that, so check this out. It sounds like this. It's not quite comfortable, but I think I've got it to the stage where I can actually just apply it to my improvising now and practice it there. So we're going to move on, and the next stage is to figure out why this lick actually sounds so good, so we can apply it to different musical scenarios. So to work out why this lick sounds so cool, and to actually be able to apply it, what we need to do is figure out how each note in the lick relates to the chord that's being played under it. So the first chord we have is an E flat 9 chord, and the beginning of the lick goes like this. Now I said earlier on that that is actually just an E flat dominant arpeggio. So what we have is the root note, the third, the fifth, and a flat 7. Now those are all of the notes that are actually in the chord, so of course they're going to sound good. We also have a chromatic movement into the first note, adding a little bit of spice there. The next note, we're still on the E flat chord. The next note is this. Now, relative to an E, that sounds pretty nasty. So that note is actually a flat 9, okay? Now what's happening here is that Matt Schofield is actually implying some diminished harmony into the lick by adding that flat 9 chord, and he's altering the dominant chord. So even though we have a 9, he's playing this note over it, which is implying a different colour to the chord, which is this. Now I say that's diminished harmony because if we actually alter that E flat to be now an E flat flat 9 chord, you'll have this. If we add an extra note here, so we're adding the fifth, if we look at the chord shape, what we have is actually a diminished chord starting from the major third of the dominant chord. So by adding that flat 9 in his lick, he's actually implying a diminished chord over the dominant chord. The next bit, he's moving just back to a dominant arpeggio there, so we've got this so far. The next bit, we're still on the E flat 9 chord. In fact, there is a chord change there, so I'm just going to see where exactly that chord change is. So yeah, on the second hammer on, that changes chord. So up to there, we're on the E flat 9 chord still. So yeah, we can relate these 4 notes to the E flat chord if we want to. We've got a flat 7, a 5, a 11, and then a 9. Okay, so another way of justifying these notes is to view them as the top of a minor pentatonic root position in B flat. Which would also make sense because we know the 1 chord is a B flat minor 7 chord, and we can play that. Now it's important to understand here that there's loads of different ways to justify why these notes are a good choice, and quite frankly, the only person who will really know why he chose them is Matt Schofield. So what we have to do is find the best way for us to get to grips with them, and for me that's to view this as the top of a minor pentatonic scale in B flat minor, or the 1 chord. Right, the next part of the lick, so that's where the chord changes, and we're playing a sharp 9 straight away. So even though we're seeing this as a minor pentatonic scale, he's actually highlighting the sharp 9 there in the next chord, which is obviously going to sound good because they're playing that exact note. Next we have this, and now I know that's a flat 7, and that's a 5. And then we're going to go to the major third. Now, that actually looks like a diminished arpeggio. And it's worth practicing your arpeggio so you can start spotting those things a little bit more quickly. So that note there is a flat 9. And the harmony works the same way as it did on the E flat 9 chord, except now we're just on an F dominant chord. Okay? So far we've got this. And then it just goes to the root note from the major third, landing on the root note of the 1 chord. So that explains the note choices he's making, but why does it sound good? Now, what he's doing by altering the dominant chords is creating added tension in the 4 and 5 chords so that the tension builds to a stage where it desperately wants to resolve to the 1 chord. And that release feels really satisfying. And that's an important thing to note here, because when you're playing dominant chords and you're adding altered colour to those dominant chords, you really want to try and resolve it in some way, otherwise it's just going to sound a little bit jarring. So if I give an example of that, and I'm playing F, and I'm adding the flat 9, and I just stay there, that doesn't sound good. But if I add the flat 9 and then resolve to either a chord tone or the root note of the next chord, it's going to sound pretty good.
That is awesome.
And that explains why this lick sounds really cool. And now that we know that we can add a flat 9 to dominant chords in this way, we can actually apply it to other dominant chords that we see in other chord progressions. So when you're jamming, for example, and playing over another dominant chord, you can think, oh, if I play a diminished arpeggio from the major third of that chord, so say we're in G, and we play from a major third, a diminished arpeggio, it's going to sound really cool because we're going to imply the flat 9. So now we've learnt the lick and we understand why the lick sounds good, so we can apply it to other areas. Now, the difficult thing that I always find here is taking that lick and actually practicing it as is in different chord progressions. For example, if you go on a backing track on YouTube, you'd have to find a chord progression that goes from a 4 to a 5. Whether it's altered or not, you're going to be implying that by playing those licks. But you would have to find a 4 chord that goes to a 5 chord. Now, that's not always possible to do, and if you want to use the lick in a different song where that definitely doesn't exist, you have to be able to break apart the lick so you can play smaller fragments that fit into the chord progression that you're playing over. Now, just to give you an insight into how to do that with this lick, we have a phrase that spans 2 chords, so the obvious thing to do is just split the lick up into 2. Now, if we do that, we get this first lick, or something like that, and we can now take that and play that over any dominant chord, just that one. And the second lick, we can do exactly the same thing. Now, like I said in the introduction, in future videos I'm going to be diving into way more detail as to actually how to practice the licks, especially those that span over a few chords like this one. It can be quite daunting and sometimes really difficult to actually know what to do with that lick you've just learned, even if you do understand it really well. So, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of the upcoming lessons. But that about covers it for this lesson. We've learnt an awesome Matt Schofield lick and know exactly how it works and why it sounds so cool, so we can apply it to other musical situations. If you enjoyed this video and gained something from the content, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like. And remember, like I said, subscribe to the channel and also press the bell notification icon down below so you're the first to know when future videos are out. I'll catch you later, guys.
Just go out and earn it again. The only thing it costs me is my time.